Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're diving into an extraordinary story of purpose, personal responsibility, and societal impact. Joining us is Oscar Newson-Smith, the visionary founder of the Racso Project, a social enterprise dedicated to rebuilding the economy and infrastructure in Turkey following the devastation of 3 catastrophic earthquakes in 2023. To raise awareness for this vital cause, Oscar has embarked on a remarkable journey, walking over 2,600 miles from his home in London to Ankara, Turkey. His path takes him through 12 countries, crossing forests, mountain ranges, cities, and towns, all in the name of inspiring change and hope. This is a conversation about courage, commitment, and the incredible power of one person's determination to make a difference. I can't wait to share Oscar's inspiring story with you today. Oscar, welcome to the campfire.
Cheers, Scott. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast, mate. And what an intro, mate. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Man, this is quite a story. I want to dive right into the adventure itself. So you're walking from London to Turkey, 2,600 miles over roughly 6 months. Tell us about this journey. Can you tell us like the route you're going to cover? Just we want to hear the full details.
So I'll go right from the beginning. So it all started at exactly 4:17 in the morning on the 17th of July, 2024. The reason I picked this symbolic time was because it was when the first earthquake struck the land of Turkey, which was on the 6th of February, 2023 at exactly 4:17 in the morning. So I started at Houses of Parliament on that date, and I took the first pilgrimage all the way to Canterbury. And then from Canterbury, I took what's called the Via Francigena, which the pilgrimage that actually starts in Canterbury and ends in Rome in Italy. But I got it all the way to France. And then I got my route from France through the Ardennes forest in Belgium, then Luxembourg. And then I walked through Germany. So much history through these countries, especially on the beaches of Normandy. Just absolutely incredible, and we'll talk about that later on. But then moving on with the route, I went through from Germany through the Austrian Alps and through then Hungary. Did a pit stop in Budapest, which was lovely, and then from Budapest, Hungary, I marched on through Serbia, and now finally in Sofia, the capital city of Bulgaria. And I've got the final stretch now, which is essentially from here all the way to Turkey. So the whole thing will have taken me more than 6 months.
Okay.
It'll have taken me around about 8 months in total.
Okay. So currently in Bulgaria. So I love the way you kind of drew that mental map for us. Can you take us the rest of the way? Where else are you going to pass through between Bulgaria and the final destination?
Yeah, so I'll be completely transparent with the viewers. So I actually left my pinpoint in Belgrade, which is the capital city of Serbia, and I'm actually spending Christmas in Bulgaria and Sofia. But going back from my pinpoint, the idea is to go from Belgrade, walk sort of southeast into the northwestern part of Bulgaria, and then I have to cross the Balkans, which is where it gets more serious because it's cold. It's very cold, especially at 2,000 meters plus in the Balkans. So that's probably going to be one of my hardest challenges of the entire route so far. And then once I've crossed the Balkans, I'll walk southeast through to Istanbul, and from Istanbul all the way to Ankara, the capital city of Turkey.
Wow, it's quite a journey. So we talked about this in the intro. It's on your website. You will be crossing through forests, mountain ranges, cities, and towns. Can you give us some of the highlights of what you've been through and what you expect to go through in terms of those sort of categories that I just spoke?
Yeah, so what I've been through, first of all, I'll answer that first part of the question. So I'll, the hardest part of my entire trip, and this is just off the back, I've not had to think about this until now, I would probably say the Ardennes Forest in Belgium. It was really, really hard. And it was hard on a number of levels. I think the route that I took, which was the E3 long distance European walking path, was exceptionally hard. It was really steep. And because it was so steep and because I was doing it in the summer, it was just really hard to get through it. In terms of what's coming up, the second part of the question, I would say the part of the route yet to come, which I'm feeling quite apprehensive about, is probably the Balkans in Bulgaria, because I'm going to be by myself and it's getting cold. The coldest part of the year in the Northern Hemisphere is yet to come. It's around about January time, January, February time. So I'll be crossing those mountains around about January time. And if anything does happen up there, there's not many things there's not many things that I can do to get help. So I think I'm feeling quite apprehensive, quite nervous for that bit.
Wow. I wonder if for listeners and for me, I want to understand sort of the logistics of this trip. Like, what are you carrying? Like, what's like preparedness? Like, where are you sleeping? What are you eating? Like, talk us through that. The kind of the
Yes,
day
so
to day.
I'm carrying everything from a solar panel charger all the way to plenty of water. And in between that, I've got clothes, tents, a -10 comfort sleeping bag. I've got a GPS system. I've also got a PLB, which is an acronym for personal locator beacon. So if anything goes wrong in the mountains, for example, if I break a leg or I'm lost, then I press down on this button and basically some sort of service will come out, rescue services in particular will come out
Mhm.
and help me. And where am I staying? It depends. It really depends. If I'm in the big cities, I will never camp in a big city because that's actually, fun enough, where the most dangerous part to
Right.
sleep
Right.
and camping. I usually, when I do camp, I'll camp next to rivers, usually at the foot of mountains and on open fields, right? When it comes to back to the cities, I'll usually pick a really cheap hostel or a
Yeah.
hotel if I have to.
Gotcha. So, are you carrying everything in a backpack?
Yeah, it's all in the backpack. I wish I could show you actually, but it's all the way in my dorm room, so I won't show you. It'd just be impossible to navigate through the hostel. But yeah, it's this great big bag, and at the start I was carrying around about 30 kilograms worth of stuff. Now I'm probably carrying around about 20 to 22 kilos, depending how much food and water I'm carrying.
Got it. Well, listen, I have to say, most people are going to be listening to this, not watching, but for those that are watching and can see you, you look pretty good for somebody that's been roughing it for
Yeah.
5 months.
Well, yeah, well, thank you. That's a great compliment. I've been eating really healthy. I've avoided junk food at all costs, and I've avoided smoking too much and drinking too much alcohol. So I think that's probably helped my skin out and it's helped my body out. But yeah, no, thank you very
Yeah.
much.
So you're 5 months into this journey so far, and I know that there have been some extreme highs and lows. And
Yeah,
I wonder if you could kind of share a little bit
yeah,
of that, some of the experiences you've had.
yeah, metaphorically and physically. Yeah, so I was quite anxious. I'm not an anxious person, but for the first time in my life, I was quite anxious around about 2 months into the trip. And the reason being is because I was anxious about raising enough donations. I had a set target of £200,000 and I'd raised around about maybe £6,000 to £7,000 at that stage. And I was anticipating a lot more in donations. And so I was feeling quite anxious about that. And they got to a stage where I was just so nervous, so stressed about it that that was probably one of my low points. And the high points is probably in Austria when so many people gave me so much love and they gave me loads of free food, loads of water, loads of beer. And this wasn't just one or two people, Scott. This was like dozens of people. And of course, I'd tell them my story, so then they'd realize that he's a good guy, maybe we should help him. But yeah, it's just like so many different people, older and younger, different ethnic backgrounds, everyone just going, right, let's help this dude. And actually, so there's not, to answer your question properly, there's not really been the highest high point. There's just been a number of high points that led to having such a good experience, and that was in Austria.
Yeah,
So
I wanna go a little deeper on both of those things. We'll take the high point first. So, like, in Austria, the people were just incredibly generous and kind to you. Like, how did, could you walk us through sort of like how did that sort of show up for you? Like, are you just kind of walking along? Like, how are you experiencing these people? How do these introductions happen? How do they see you? How do they find you?
yeah, so like one example that I can come up with was I walked into, well, before walking into this restaurant, I was looking for loads of other restaurants, and all of these other restaurants were closed. So I was getting really angry. I was shouting and whatever to myself, of course. And then, yeah, because Scott, sometimes you get so angry that you just have to, you have to release it, you know. And that particular day, this particular day that I'm thinking of, I'd walked 46 kilometers to get to this village, thinking that there'd be a restaurant there because Google Maps says so. It said so. And I get there, everything's closed apart from one restaurant. And when I get into the restaurant, I'm like, oh, thank God for this. And I start ordering food. I think I ordered a beer, and I start talking to the table next to me. And everyone always asks, like, you know, why on earth are you in this small village? Because I usually walk through really small villages, right? At the end of the day, most of Europe consists of small villages rather than one big city. And I obviously tell them my story. I tell them the cause. And they had this big plate of venison. It's deer meat for those who don't know. And they offered me this. They had pizza, they offered me that. And they kept on offering me drinks or whatever. So I said, yeah, go on, I'll have a couple of drinks. And I bought drinks myself. And long story short, at the end of the night, I went up to the bartender to say, look, I'm ready to pay my tab. And at this point, the whole table had left already. And they said, no, don't worry about it, mate. The previous table, they paid for it all. So they didn't even, it's, you know, they just did it. They paid for it and then left before telling me, before I could realize. And that's just so nice, because they could have stayed there and got the sort of validation from me to say thank you, whatever, but they didn't even need it. They just wanted to help me out, and that's what they did. And it's so humble of them. So yeah, that's one example of the many high points that I've had on this trip.
Did that surprise you? Did that hospitality that the people of that local village showed you, did it surprise you?
Interestingly enough, yes and no. I suppose it surprised me in some regards, but it didn't surprise me because I would do the same for others.
Mhm.
So at some stage, at some points, I even expected it. In the nicest way. I'd get somewhere and I'd ask for a bit of water or a bit of this, and you almost expect free water, right? But yes and no, yes and no.
I'm curious, like, what your expectation of people in general, and maybe even as like you cross from border to border into different countries, and how like maybe some of those expectations were either met or not met along this journey.
Yeah, I mean, I had expectations of France to be quite warm, but I found it and quite urbanized.
Yeah.
But actually, not many people live in France, so I got quite lonely in France. And
Interesting.
I thought Hungary was going to be more economically developed, and I realized how run down it really is as a country. And the first half of my trip in Hungary, the people were really nice on the western side, on the border with Austria. But people in the south, for some reason, weren't as friendly. So I expected them to be a bit friendlier. But other than that, I have low expectations. I think we're all better off having lower expectations when we're traveling.
Or none, just show up and see what comes, right?
or none. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to come back to the low point, because I find this so interesting that, you know, you're on this 8-month journey of walking, an incredibly long distance through whatever conditions show up for you. And I'm expecting some physical like hardship. And what you shared as a low point was more of like was anxiety, really over kind of a, the fundraising aspect, which is more kind of like a mental, and I guess I'm curious if you can go a little bit deeper with me on that one, where the
Yeah.
low was not physical, it was more this sort of expectation you had put on yourself.
Yeah, it was emotional. It was the low is emotional. I think when your body is telling you it's low on energy, it starts to stiffen up.
Hmm.
And I actually feel that way right now. I'm quite fatigued. I feel quite lethargic, and I think also your mind is far stronger yet more fragile than your body. Your body can go like your body is so much more capable than what your mind thinks, and we've all heard it on so many podcasts. What I just said, it's quite cheesy, right? But it's proven, and I've experienced this, so I can tell you for a fact that the body can go a lot further than what we primarily think. But yeah, I haven't had any low points with my body. Okay, I got the flu once in Germany, and okay, I felt like really bad then, and I suppose that was a low point for my body. But yeah, I've only had low points emotionally, which is quite interesting actually to think about. I hadn't really thought about this before.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I love that. I'm curious, you talked about how the body is way more capable than we think. Like,
Yeah.
what do you have any examples of how that showed up for you? Like where your body sort of surprised you?
Well, I got this far, I suppose,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and I thought my body was going to be far more tired. So it surprised me to that extent. I've also been able to do 50. I've done quite a few 50-kilometer days. I
Wow.
did a 49 kilometer. I had a 49-kilometer day 2 days ago, and my personal best is 58.5 kilometers.
Wow.
And so I'd feel really like I'd feel as if I'd been walking on pins. Like your feet after 50 kilometers carrying 25 kg worth of weight, it like your body's in bits. But this may well be because I'm young. But the next day, boom, fully recovered.
Wow.
And I am also eating well. So if anyone out there is listening to this and they want to be able to run ultra marathons and walk ultra marathon distances or expeditions like Mount Everest, honestly, the most important thing you can do for your body in the present moment and for your future self in 20, 30, 40 years ahead is to eat well.
Mm, I love that. I can't just move on from that. I think that is awesome. I really appreciate you bringing that in. And I
Yeah.
guess I'm really curious, like walking, and having to be minimalistic carrying a backpack. How do you do that? How do you eat well when you're backpacking? I mean, most people when they're backpacking, they're eating junk just to get calories in.
Mate, big time, Scott. So that's good. That's a fair point. That's a very fair point, actually. So so I could either eat really well and carry a couple of kilograms more of weight, or I can stop off at like really like either junk food places like McDonald's or
Mm,
bad kebab places, and or I can carry really light food which doesn't have much nutritional value. So I've always gone for the former. I've always carried a lot of onions, a lot of garlic, a lot of healthy-ish tinned food. Most tinned food isn't the best for you, but you can get really healthy tinned food as well. And of course, that weighs a lot, like a lot.
yeah.
And I remember right at the start of my trip, I actually had this cart. So I'd put it around my waist. You can't see where my hands are, but I'd put it around my waist and I'd pull it. And I had like olive oil, truffle oil. I had like loads of different types of fruit and whatever. And like it probably weighed maybe 5 kilograms. So this is the thing, like the only way that you're going to eat healthy on such a long expedition is if you're willing to carry the extra weight.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
I love it. I appreciate that. And I love that point about, I just wrote down for myself, like longevity equals good nutrition.
Oh, big time. Absolutely big time. Big time.
Love it.
And now, won't delve into the politics too much of the states, but there's a lot of chatter going around, especially on social media and mass media and podcasts like this one here. And a lot of people are talking about the pesticides that we're using for fruit and vegetables. And we can't forget how important pesticides are, because they really do maximize how much can be harvested.
Yeah.
But there comes a stage where it's just going to affect our bodies. And that's usually cheaper food. So if we have to spend a bit more on more nutritious food, trust me, it's worth every single cent and penny.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. All right. So I want to pivot to kind of the purpose behind this walk. And I always just want to start for those, obviously it's global news, but if you can tell us a little bit more, what happened in Turkey in 2023 that inspired you to take on this project?
Sure. So on 4:17 in the morning, on the 6th of February 2023, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck the land of Turkey and Syria. And a second earthquake struck the land a couple of days after, and another 6.4 earthquake, the third one, struck the land on the 19th of February. So three really big earthquakes. 7.8, 7.6 was the second one, and 6.4 was the third one. Completely decimated cities, especially in southern Turkey. So I was a carpenter / construction manager for a high-end building firm in London during that time. I then thought to myself, as I was in my comfortable bed in leafy Surrey, I thought to myself, well, this is my industry that's failed the people of Turkey. And I felt a level of responsibility, Scott. And so I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to go and help. I'm going to go and volunteer. And there was a calling from my mother, actually. And my mother was in my mind saying, you should go and help. You should do something to help out, in particularly the children. And so I flew out there. I told my boss, packed my bags up, flew out there. First flight I could possibly get, which I'll be completely honest. So I made a decision on the Thursday, told my boss on the Friday, and I got the earliest flight out on Tuesday. And so that's exactly what I did. And when I got there, I didn't think it would have such a profound effect on my life. But I'll be completely transparent with the viewers. It completely changed my perspective and my views on the entire world.
Wow, that is very, very powerful. And I want to hear a little bit more. I'm curious, if this had happened anywhere else, do you think you would have had the same impact? Was there something, I mean, is this just a humanity, like a natural disaster, and you just connected with that? Was there something about the region?
So I'll say one statement, and that should hopefully suggest an answer. There's only one race, and that's the human race. So it doesn't matter if it'd been in Haiti, it doesn't matter if it'd been in like Japan. It's not got to do with race, color, or anything like that. However, I suppose if it was in a more developed country, there would have been less of a need for me to go. But because southern Turkey is rather slightly underdeveloped, it's not underdeveloped, but it's just underneath the sort of what we would consider a developed country. I felt the need because of that reason, because they needed it most. The search and rescue teams got there way too late. Okay, there was a lot of that, like the news was bombarded with this, of course, but yeah, I felt like something was missing, and that's why I wanted to go. I also wanted to donate, but because the corruption levels in Turkey is so high, I thought, no, I don't feel comfortable donating, so I'll go there instead.
So this was part of it though, because you, in your profession, are connected to the construction industry. And so there was definitely a connection that you experienced related to construction in particular.
Sure,
I wonder if you
exactly.
can talk about like that, your background in construction and how I think the infrastructure in Turkey that was affected by the hurricanes, your background in construction, you felt that sort of personal responsibility.
Sure. Well, so in construction, we've got something called the builder's dilemma. This is how it works. You've got a triangle. At the top, you've got quality. Bottom left, you've got cost. On the bottom right, you've got time. Supposedly, every construction project can only achieve its goal with the sacrifice of one or the other. So let me give you an example. If you want to build a bridge and it's super high quality and it's done really, really quickly, you're going to have to sacrifice cost because it's going to be mega expensive. If you want to build fast and build cheaply so that your profit margins go up, you're going to sacrifice which one? Quality. And that's exactly what happened in Turkey, and that's why so many buildings fell down. There's a famous Japanese saying that goes as follows: there's no such thing as bad earthquakes, just bad buildings.
Wow. And so you felt a connection directly to that when this, like, how did, like, it seemed like it happened so fast. Like, you made the decision on Thursday, told your boss on Friday. Could you, like, walk us through, like, what you experienced inside your head, inside your body that connected, like, you, Oscar, to what happened in the construction industry, like this sort of
Yeah.
circle?
So, I mean, so to be honest, the reason I think I had a calling was from my mother, and my mum's still around, by the way. She's still with us. But the reason I got this calling, which I didn't explain before, and I will do now, is that, can you remember the 2003 Boxing Day tsunami in the Indian Ocean? Basically, there was this massive tsunami.
Yes, the tsunami. Yep.
Boxing Day of 2003, 2004.
Yep.
Not quite sure which year it was. And I was in Girona at the time. And I remember her saying, sort of mumbling it to herself and also to my dad. She said, God, and we were watching the news, of course. And she says, I wish I could go and help. But she couldn't do. She couldn't go to Sri Lanka or to India to help out with the carnage because she had 4 kids to look after. She had a house to maintain, etc., etc. And that sprung to my mind when I was sitting down in my bed. And I thought, well, I don't have a mortgage, I haven't bought a house yet. I don't have children. I've got hardly any responsibilities. I might as well use my privilege. And by privilege, I mean, I've got a bit of cash saved up. I'm a construction manager, so I know a lot to do with construction, and I'm fit and healthy. So I might as well use my privilege to go and actually do some good for the world. And the reason I think Turkey was a good place to start my humanitarian career, shall we put it, is because bureaucratically I can get involved. I wasn't able to get into Syria, for example, because I'm a British passport holder. If I go into Syria, I can't leave Syria. I can't help. I can't go into Ukraine. If I go into Ukraine, I can't leave again, right? Well, that was the rule for a certain amount of time. You can actually go into Ukraine and leave now again. But there's not much I can do with conflict, right? Bureaucratically. But because Turkey's disaster had nothing to do with conflict, I was able to bureaucratically get involved, and that's exactly why I got involved.
That's awesome. And so it almost sounds like this was sort of a seed that your mom planted in you during a previous natural disaster that she wasn't able to go help with. And so you kind of felt this calling to kind of take that seed and go do something with it.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. It's something perhaps spiritual as well.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's sort of some spiritual force going on behind all of this. But yeah, it's incredible. The experiences I had in Turkey, in the earthquake zone, and the experiences that are leading up to me returning to Turkey are they're all like really similar for some reason. I'm seeing the same number again and again and again, and that's the number 17. I see the number 4 and 17 quite a bit. Number 4 because it's my birthday, but 17 because of many other personal reasons, which I won't go into. But yes, I was constantly seeing 17 everywhere I was going, and And it's just ironic that the earthquake struck at exactly 4:17 in the morning.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, there's something like that must have been like super empowering inside of you. Like this thing happened and you could have, just sort of witnessed it and said how horrible and said a prayer, but no, like you got on a plane and went. Like what was that like getting off the plane? What were your sort of first steps? Like
Oh,
what what
yeah.
was the
So
planning? Like, what was the experience of just going and showing
yeah,
up?
yeah. I was so nervous, Scott. I was so nervous. There were people telling me that potentially there's like ISIS that have come from Syria, walked into Turkey to escape the disaster, and that there was no law and order. That's why the military were called in. I was told that it's like a war zone, and to expect it to be as such. And so I was pretty nervous. I was really, really nervous. I was feeling really insecure because I was thinking, cool, blimey, if anything goes wrong with myself, I couldn't take out insurance. Tried to take out insurance, wasn't able to take out insurance. So yeah, I was pretty nervous, pretty
So
nervous.
very, very nervous, but you went anyway. Like there obviously was this, stronger part of you that just kept moving forward and showed
Yeah.
up.
Well, I suppose I paid for the tickets already, so there's no backing out.
True.
They
True.
were
So
quite,
what
they
were
were
the
quite.
first couple of days like when you arrived?
So I get there, and the first thing I realize is the amount of destruction. Like when I'm talking about destruction, I'm talking about 3.3 million people having been displaced from these earthquakes. Over 55,000 people died, potentially a lot more because we've not been able to find thousands of bodies. So that figure could be a lot higher. But the first couple of days, I remember just seeing these massive 12, 13, 14-story buildings just either collapsed all the way down just to to rubble, reduced to rubble, or what was even more impactful was these massive buildings on like a 45-degree angle. It was just insane. It's insane. Okay, you see it on the news, you see it in front of a lens, or you see it on a camera or whatever on your phone, but the smell as well was awful. And I'm not talking about poor sewage works. I'm talking about dead corpses. So it was straight away. There's one word to describe it. If I had to come up with one word to describe it, I would use the word intense. It was incredibly intense, and the amount of trauma there. People were crying with the victims, and I mean volunteers that come from Istanbul and Ankara. They'd come down. I was part of this big organization, this big volunteer camp, and I remember one day we were in this big storage facility, and in this storage facility there may have been around about 100 volunteers, and outside of this storage facility there would have been maybe 300, 400 earthquake victims ready to pick up some food, hygiene products, tent, whatever, you name it, that everything was there, right? It'd been donated from the rest of the world. Everything was located in this big storage facility. And I'd actually arrived late to what happened next. And basically, one day, the day before I arrived, apparently like half of the volunteers started hugging the earthquake victims, and everyone just started crying. Like literally everyone started crying. So the amount of trauma was pretty surreal. But I was able to detach from it because it's not my country. I wasn't able to speak Turkish at that point. I'm only able to speak maybe a dozen or two words of Turkish now. But at that stage, I didn't understand a word of Turkish. So I was able to detach myself pretty effectively. And that's what kept me sane, I think.
Yeah. What was your role in the helping efforts? What did you do in those days?
So the first couple of days, I actually befriended a group of people, which to this day I'm still friends with. The leader of the group was a dude called Ilian Doruk and his friend Atta, and there were these other two girls called Beza and Eket. And so we formed this group of five of us, and Atta and Doruk, they had this car. They drove down from Istanbul with a friend's car, And so what we were able to do is that Daruk had this app where victims were able to send messages into this app and send whatever they needed most. And so because we were staying in this next to this storage facility, we would pick up whatever it is that the victims needed, and we would drive to the victims' houses or to their tents. It was actually usually mainly their tents because their house had been collapsed. And we'd basically just hand out all of these hygiene products, tents, blankets, food, water, you name it.
Yeah, so cool. Obviously, you're deeply connected to this cause. You create the Racso Project, which I can't wait to hear a little bit more about.
Yeah.
I want to go there next, but right before that, I'm just curious, like, as you sit here today and you look back at like those days when the earthquake happened and you felt this calling and you got on a plane and you went and you helped, like, as you look back at that, do you see any sort of like threads from like other parts of your life, or just like, is there anything that sort of surprises you about like that week or two when you like got on the plane and like went there to help?
Oof. It's a very good question. It was like a bit of a dream,
Yeah.
and it was a bit of a dream. So I wouldn't say that there were any threads to the rest of my life to that 2 week period in the earthquake. If that was the right question, I don't know if
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I guess like, is there any doubt in your mind today that that was the thing you were meant to do?
Oh, right. You were questioning if that was fate. Um, yeah. 100%. I was meant to do that. I was meant to do that, and I was meant to do that because of this this numerical synchronicity.
Yeah.
Because it's unbelievable. Honestly, 17. So I'll just go through the number 17 again, and that will answer the question more in more depth. So something happened when I was 17 years old, which I won't go into, but it was really profound and it's stuck in my mind till this day. And maybe a year before the earthquakes, I landed a really good job on this new construction site, and that was on 17 College Road. I then moved away from home to my mate's house, 17A Villa Road. So those were, and that's not coincidence like that. It's not like I picked those two. I just happened to go into those two and then realize the number 17. And then I'd sit down at restaurants and I'd have like really good conversations with like my cousin and friends and family and whatnot. And then I'd realize that we were sitting on on table 17, for example. The other day, this is even better. I nearly missed my bus from Belgrade to Sofia, again, because I'm staying here for Christmas and I will go back after Christmas. And I just about get there, like 2 minutes spare. And you have to write down your details on this sort of Excel sheet. And I had to fill out my details on the number 17 to be precise. So it's just everywhere. It's
Yeah, it's
everywhere,
amazing.
everywhere. And the fact that the first earthquake struck at exactly 4:17 for me is a sign of fate.
Yeah.
I believe in fate. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in mathematics. I believe that we could well be in a simulation, and so yeah, I believe in fate. But because we create our own fate, of course,
Yeah.
not that something else is controlling us. I believe we're controlling ourselves, to a certain extent.
Yeah. I love this. Thank you for that. So this experience led you to create a social organization to
Exactly.
further the assistance to the region. Tell us about this.
Yeah. So I had a couple of options. First of all, however, let me start off saying how I basically set up a team in southern Turkey, right? And this was pre setting up this organization called the Racso Project. And I had a really good group of people that I wanted to help who'd been impacted by the earthquakes. And I'd even found myself a really trustworthy translator called Gugsel. Great man. absolute trooper. And I then decided, we then had a brainstorm thinking about where the donations, because I wanted to raise donations for them, right? So we thought, right, well, where will the donations go into? And we thought, well, okay, well, the organization that's actually in Samandar, the city that I'm repairing, that it's a charity called Sade, right? So I was going to just represent Sade, and I was going to raise donations, and the money will be sent directly to Sade. However, Scott, because corruption levels are so high in Turkey, Charlotte Chamali, who's the director of that charity down in Samandar, she said that she didn't feel comfortable if the donations were sent directly to that bank account, right? So then that's when I was like, okay, and we therefore have to set a British bank account and a British social enterprise so that all the donations can go to that British bank account, and then I can safely send that money to the recipient of the funds, which will be Charlotte Chamali. And the reason Charla was so scared about this, so scared about the donations primarily going into their organization, into their bank account, is because there was a Dutch, half Turkish singer. She raised 40 million euros in basically hosting loads of music concerts just after the earthquakes. And all of that money went into a Turkish bank account, a Turkish charity bank account. And unfortunately, the Turkish state, froze the account, and the money has gone missing. So there's a lot of corruption in Turkey. It's a well-known thing. Everyone knows this. And we wanted to avoid such a thing. So we thought, right, let's set this up in Britain where it's a lot safer.
Makes sense. So can you talk about the mission of the Racso Project?
Yes, the mission of the Racso Project is to essentially raise donations in order to rebuild and redevelop Samandar's infrastructure and economy. So Samandar now has a soaring unemployment rate, around about 42 to 44%. We're not quite sure, but around about there. That percentage of the infrastructure came down. And so basically people are homeless. Loads of people are living in tents. Loads of people have left Samandar, and there's not much hope. So our mission goal is to essentially rebuild and redevelop that economy in Samandar in order to give people hope and in order to give people the life that they deserve.
Yeah. And you and I had an opportunity to talk a little bit before we met up again today to record this episode. And one of the things you shared with me was that as part of this, it was your hope to build an eco community. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, exactly. So I could either raise donations and start building the very same buildings that came down during the earthquakes, but that's just not sustainable. We want to rebuild Samandar with these eco communities, number one, because they'll be strong enough to withstand future earthquakes, and number two, because it will minimize the negative effects to the environment for present and future generations.
Yeah. And can you kind of elaborate for those that aren't familiar with the term eco community, what that means?
Yes, so an eco community, essentially what it is it's an ecological community where the people, in the bottom of their heart, they think about the environment foremost. So in addition to that, it's about having and using renewable energy, for example. It's about using ecological materials such as wood over concrete, again, because wood is far better for the environment than concrete is. Trees are regenerative, concrete isn't. And so to summarize it quickly, it's about using materials that are good for the environment and harnessing energy that's renewable, and also that the people of the community think utmost of the environment and want to look after it. And also, in addition, it's about having sort of environmental agricultural practices, so not using pesticides or any chemicals and stuff like that.
Love this. Okay, so I want to kind of bring a lot of this together from, your background in construction and, getting on this plane and going to Turkey to help and creating the Racso Project. Where does like taking a walk from London to Turkey fit into all of this?
Yeah. So I basically, after I set up the Racso Project, I was thinking about ways of fundraising. And I was on a commute to work one morning, and I was writing in my notepad on this commute to work. I was on this train, and on this carriage, I was looking around, and everyone was looking really depressed and looking really miserable. They didn't look happy at all. Everyone was sort of staring at their phone or reading a newspaper, sort of half asleep. And I wrote down a question. And the question was, how many people on this tube, on this carriage, are actually achieving their childhood dreams? And my answer was probably no one, because I know they'd look a lot happier. And so I thought about my own childhood dreams. And when I was 11 years old, I'd have this bedside table. And on this bedside table, I'd have this globe. And I would envision walking all over the world on this globe. And so I thought, okay, that was my childhood dream. I've also set up a charity that deals with rebuilding earthquake-torn Turkey. So that's in Turkey. I live in London. Boom. That's when I had the epiphany. In order to start fundraising, I'm going to walk from London all the way to Turkey. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now.
It's amazing. Seriously, like this. And so this is what, I mean, I think this is what this podcast is all about. It's like listening to the voice inside that calls you to adventure and then getting outside and doing it. In this story, you're bringing together sort of something that really mattered to you in childhood
Yeah.
and coupling it with a huge, huge cause
Yeah.
that's going to help so many different people. And I'm just curious, what is that like for you to like, to take something that was just like important to the childhood you, just like this globe, like I just want to walk around the world and be able to put it together with such a big mission.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to have a good relationship with yourself. We always talk about being friendly and polite to others, but you have to start with yourself. And actually, before I set up the Racso project, I'd actually set up a charity that had failed. And that was we called it CSFW Turkey. And CSFW Turkey, that's an acronym. So basically, it means charity starts from within. So if you want to help anyone else out, it doesn't matter if it's your family or friends or community or wider community or even global community for that matter, you have to start with looking after yourself. And by doing so, you have to listen to your younger self. If your younger self wanted to do something, you should pay attention to it, because that's you. You got to love yourself. You got to love your younger self, right? It's important because it's one way of looking after others at the same time, by looking after yourself. And I'm not encouraging people to be full-blown narcissists and just think about themselves. I'm just saying that if you want to help others, it works contemporaneously by looking after yourself.
So I think like a word that sort of came to me, it's like the opposite of what you've been able to do is the word sacrifice, which is
Mm.
like almost like putting yourself on hold for the sake of others. But somehow you've like put together this sort of like this way of, pleasing your inner child while also serving like a huge purpose. It's like this beautifully magical both and.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I
It's
mean,
super cool. And I think that's what's so inspiring. It's, the idea that you can have both.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think I would have gone insane if I didn't have those two things to do this. If I
Yeah.
was just doing it for the childhood dream, I would have quit a long time ago. If I was just doing it for the charity, I honestly think I would have quit as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think I could ask you so many more questions, but I think that like that brings it home to the essence of like what we're trying to talk about here on this podcast. And I appreciate that so much. Um, for people that are listening that w- are hearing your story and inspired by what we just talked about, sort of connecting like those childhood dreams with a purpose that's bigger than ourselves. Like what advice do you have for people in connecting with something that they're really passionate about?
find something that you're passionate about and make sure it's virtuous, because you can be passionate about something but have bad intentions, and that's not what we need in society. In addition, seek to contribute to society rather than just earn capital. We've got plenty of people that are really ambitious capitalists, and I'm a capitalist myself. I set up my own company, whatever. But we need more green capitalists that are actually thriving to contribute to society rather than just thriving to earn loads of profits.
Yeah.
Because our economy won't last a lot longer, especially if everyone turned to the former. If everyone just wanted to be a full-blown capitalist and just wanted to earn loads of money, it's just going to cripple our economy. So actually, if we are interested in our passions and monetizing on those passions and building a life for ourselves and others, then we need to think about doing something that's not just money focused.
Yeah. So I want to ask you something. One of the first, I love this, like seek to contribute. And then before that, you said find something. And I wrote those words down, find something. And I'm curious, like, were you looking for something when the earthquakes happened and you got on that airplane?
Wow, that's a good point. That's a good point. How do you find something if you don't know what you're looking for? Just I suppose open yourself up. And okay, this is the first analogy that springs to mind. When you're looking for a wife, I don't know if you're married or not.
Yep.
Let's say you are, and most of the time people find love when they simply weren't looking for it.
Yeah.
But they were open to the idea.
Yeah.
So just be open to the idea that you'll find a passion, but don't be needy. Nobody wants needy people. It's not attractive. Do not be needy. Just let it come to you. And if it comes to you, it comes to you. If it doesn't, you're a better man or woman because you were never needy for it anyway.
I love it, man. So full of wisdom. This is great. Oscar, how can people get involved? How can they help?
Yeah, well, I'd encourage everyone to become a donor. I'd
Okay.
encourage everyone to read my story, to share the story around, and to chuck in a couple of pennies or pounds or dollars or cents, and get involved with it. Because if I can build this eco community in Turkey, it's also a really big message to the rest of the world, because construction is really polluting. So if I can build an eco community in a disaster zone, it basically means there's no other reason not to in the developed world, like London, New York, Hong Kong, Chicago, etc., etc. So, don't just get involved because it's good for the victims of Samandağ in southern Turkey. Get involved because it gives the Racso Project an opportunity to completely revolutionize the construction industry.
Yeah. I love this. And so how can people find those stories, and where do they donate? What's the best way for people to get
So
them?
I've got if anyone that's listening has Instagram, my Instagram account is at Racso Project. That's spelled RACSO Project. Racso is basically Oscar spelled backwards. So Racso Project. And then I've got a link tree on there. And on there, I've got a GoFundMe link, a website link. I've got a link that shows me on Turkish news. And if you want to go directly to my website, it's theracsoproject.com. So THERACSO project.com. And if you want to go directly to my GoFundMe link, that's simply GoFundMe. And then just type in my name, Oscar Newson-Smith, OSCARNEWSON-Smith.
Amazing. Oscar, you are a big thinker and you're following your childhood dream. And at some point, Hollywood is going to pick up on your story and they're going to want to make a movie about this big adventure. And I want to know, when they do, who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie?
I think it'd be Shia LaBeouf. I think I look
nice.
I think I look somewhat similar to him. I'm a bit taller than him, but it doesn't matter. Tom Cruise can look 6'4" at times, so it doesn't matter too much about the height. But yeah, I think he'd be able to play me pretty well. I think
That's
we're rather
great.
similar. This is if he's sane, because I think he went off the
He's
radar for
great.
a bit.
I love his movies.
Yeah,
That's a
him
great
and
one.
Harrison Ford, they're a great duo. So,
Yeah, absolutely. What's your movie going to be called?
oof, that one's a hard one. I would call it. I was thinking maybe Dreams.
Nice.
Dreams, like it because it started all off as a dream. I'm going to call it Dreams.
Nice. This is amazing. I love this. Oscar, man, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thanks for what you're doing for inspiring people by both following your own dreams and serving such a big purpose. It's been such a great delight to have this conversation with you. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Oscar's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Oscar, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure.